of the explosion in Boksburg under the bridge in South Africa on December 23rd, 2022, I'd like to add a couple of comments and raise a couple of issues. I'm Stan Bezuidenhout from IBF Investigations, and through the scope of my career over the last 22 years, I've done my fair share of investigations around truck fires, including arson cases and obviously also explosions. In this case, there's been a lot of speculation, which is natural and understandable, but I would just like to address the issue of what would typically be done in a case of this kind. There are 5 factors that we typically consider, and I'll start from the inside and work out in concentric circles. The first and most obvious one is the driver, which is probably what a lot of people are going to focus on. Already there's been talk about whether the driver could have obviously seen the height of the bridge and whether the driver obviously should have known. But it's important that we understand that there's a chance that the driver might not have been properly trained, properly licensed, or even in possession of a proper professional driving permit. Equally, when a driver is involved in an incident of this kind carrying any dangerous chemicals, the chances are that the driver will be trained on some kind of protocol to follow at the time. If you are driving a truck and it has any kind of dangerous chemicals on it and there's any risk of leakage, exposure, or even fire or an explosion, you would know that you need to get people as far back as possible. Also, when the fire department arrives on the scene, they will look at the actual product number on the back of the truck. They will identify the kind of chemical involved and then establish some kind of perimeter and protocols. The question in this case would be whether the driver would have known. Firstly, would the driver have been allowed to travel on that route? In order to determine that, the question would be, where was he going? What was his delivery destination, or where was he coming from? Secondly, whether he drove there regularly or whether this was a one-time event, whether he's ever driven there with other trucks or only this one, whether he was aware and trained on the relevant protocols. So did he know what the actual height of his truck was? And then whether he made a decision to drive through there impromptu or carefully. I mean, imagine if you are the driver and you're approaching a bridge and you see a sign for which you cannot clearly see the height. You cannot determine whether it's 3.6, 3.5, 3.8 or 3.9 meters. You can do one of two things. Either you can completely ignore the sign and just carry on driving, which means you're going to crash into the bridge at some kind of speed, or you can approach with caution and go, I don't know if I'm going to make it, and then kind of cautiously travel forward, and if it gets stuck, that'll be it. Which brings us to the next point, and that is whether the fire was caused by the truck hitting the bridge or by some kind of external ignition. So let's imagine that this truck driver tried to pass under the bridge, the truck got stuck, and there was some kind of leakage. Maybe there was no fire at this stage. The truck driver might have exited and left the area, and then someone else might have entered the area, lit a cigarette or had a cigarette, or a car might have driven past that has some kind of spark. We don't know. So that would have to be determined. Then next to the driver, we will go on to the issue of the mechanical aspect or the mechanical factor or the design and the vehicle itself. Maybe the driver was intending to stop and his brakes had failed and he couldn't even stop properly. Maybe he could have stopped before hitting the bridge. So we need to examine the brake system on the truck. Equally, we need to get the specifications on the truck. Is the physical truck actually higher than the bridge, or was there something about the design that made it abnormal, compared to its original specifications? Also, we have to look at things like whether there's anything inside the truck or the cab that a driver can immediately see. Are these trucks fitted with a sticker, for instance, on the inside of the window, informing the driver of the height of the truck? Is it something he has to remember or something he can see and keep handy? And then also we need to look at the possibility that the truck was not fully loaded. From the explosion at least, it looks like it could have been, but could have been partially loaded. And if it's in a partially unloaded state, it might be a little bit higher. Let's say it typically delivers a full load in this area, and then it means that the suspension components are slightly compressed and he can pass under the bridge with no problem. On this day or today, he might have delivered half of his load somewhere, or some of his load somewhere, which means the truck is now slightly higher, or at least the trailer is slightly higher, and this would mean that he gets trapped, so we'd have to look at that. We would also look at the road engineering or the environment. Now the question comes, were there warning signs? Are there warning signs? Are they clearly visible? Are they SABS compliant? In other words, are they installed in keeping with the Road Traffic Act in South Africa? So we need to investigate that aspect as well. Equally, I've seen mentioned that trucks are not even allowed on that road. I've looked on Google Maps. I have not seen any signs that prohibit the truck driving there. And from the scrape marks under the bridge, I assume many trucks may have driven there in the past. If it's common for trucks to drive there and they are not allowed there, the question comes up, what about the law enforcement component and what was being done to prevent them from driving there? So often when bridges are exceptionally low, there are perhaps overhangs or warning overhangs to alert the driver to the fact that he cannot pass under the bridge. The question is whether these were present. I see none on Google Maps either. The last thing we need to look is the environment and how busy the environment was. There was some talk on social media about the possibility that it was a route the driver chose because another route was busy. We'd have to look whether that's even true and what the implications are. So those are the elements we want to look at as far as the investigation is concerned. But I also want to touch on the issue of the videos and the photographs that have been making the rounds. I've already seen comments on some of the so-called crime groups. I'm going to explain why I say so-called now, where people said, please don't share sensitive videos. Well, the fact is that firstly, the videos are typically coming off social media, and even the major news networks are sharing extremely graphic videos, and it's out in the public domain now. So now everybody has seen it and will see it. So it's not unnatural for people to keep sharing it, and it certainly, there's no component about it that makes it illegal, but one would ask the question whether it's if it's the right thing to do. But then we get to the issue of what is in the public interest. Clearly an event of this size, sad or horrible as it might be, is clearly in the public interest, and people are going to be sharing and commenting on this. And then also I would just like to add a point in closing. People are often, I see it all the time, that people join so-called crime groups, lookout groups, transport risk groups, crash report groups, road safety groups, and all kinds of bolos and lookouts and all kinds of groups where they want to be informed about and follow issues regarding crime and crime-related issues. The fact is that, firstly, this is probably mature content. It's not the kind of stuff that you want children to see, because often photographs and videos are shared that illustrate the graphicality of crime in South Africa. So for instance, I once had somebody complain because I shared a video, and they said, look, can't you please stop sharing these kinds of videos on my crime and risk awareness group, by the way, because my child plays with my phone and then they see this. Well, I don't think it's intelligent to belong to crime groups where crime-related information is shared if your children are going to play with your phone. If you want to protect your children, you should protect them from everything. You have maybe 500 friends on your friends group. They could send you something disturbing. So it's probably a better idea to manage access to your device rather than to manage content on it. And then also I see on the crime at these kinds of groups that people say don't share it here. Well, the fact is, if you're on a crime or an incident or an emergency group and you're offended by the kind of content that will come out of that, then perhaps you should be on a different group. It is the nature of the beast. You don't go to the movies to watch a horror movie and complain about horrible scenes. You don't go to watch a movie about car racing and complain it's full of cars. Equally, if you belong to a crime group, a crime awareness group, a crime sharing group, or anything that can interface or dovetail with the reality of crime in South Africa, then surely you should expect that kind of content. A good idea would be to set your device so that you don't always download media, but only when you choose to. That way, if you see the narrative surrounding a particular post to indicate the possibility of something disturbing, you can simply choose not to download it. I think that brings us to the end of this video. It is a horrible incident. Obviously, our condolences goes out to every single victim and their families. It's terrible that this should have happened. The investigation might reveal that it was completely avoidable. We certainly hope so that we can use the learnings from this to prevent a future incident, and perhaps there will be a change in law enforcement, or perhaps there will even be signs posted in the area now. Thank you for your time, and I hope this has at least informed and educated some of you a little bit.